People say all the time how they want to live in the Pokemon world, but where would you want to live? We currently have 10 mainline regions, from the original Kanto region to the most recent Paldea region, and even the original Hisui region before it would eventually be known as Sinnoh. Each of them have amazing and terrible qualities that could make or break anyone living within them. From the Pokemon residing within each region to the evil organizations that lurk in the shadows, the environment that you have to brave in order to travel between cities, and lastly, the cities themselves and the gym leaders within them, because after all, when those evil groups show up, I'm gonna need some backup. So I'm gonna take you from region to region, ranking them as we go through them, and decide which region is truly the best Pokemon region to live in. Hi there, I'm Curlic, and as I said in the intro, we will be judging every single region based on 4 primary things that I stated in the intro. 1. What Pokemon are there? After all, of course, everyone has a preference, and while yes, we do live in the modern age, we're going to assume we're just your average person who might be starting their Pokemon adventure. This isn't just about, oh, Gengar's my favorite Pokemon, so I'm gonna go ahead and choose any region above any other that would have Gengar in it. No, this is also about what Pokemon are going to help me, what Pokemon are going to be a threat to me on my journeys, which ones are aggressive, territorial. How am I going to survive the day-to-day trying to get a Pokemon partner? 2, what evil organization is there? We are going to assume that we are living there at the height of the evil organization's dastardly deeds. We do not get the benefit of living in the region post-game story. 3, what is the environment like? Some places have some rough environments, deserts that you are forced to cross through, deep, lush jungles, and just climates in general that I feel might be terrible to exist in. And 4, what are the cities, gym leaders, and the gyms like? Can I easily find a Pokemon Center? Where are the convenience stores? Where can I get myself some good food? And will the gym leaders actually try to end my life to ensure I never get a chance of earning their badge? Or are they actually going to help me when those evil organizations rise up? After all, in the end, we are human, we have basic needs, and survival is kind of one of them. So with that, then let's start with Kanto. Starting with the Pokemon here, it is supposed to be the first place where some of the largest and well-known technological advancements are made. Technically, I guess you could also say biological advancements. This extends from the revival of fossils, such as Kabuto and Ammonite, all the way to the creation of Mewtwo itself. The Pokemon here, from route to route, aren't the absolute worst, I suppose, but there are still plenty of Pokemon to be afraid of in the end, as they can be incredibly territorial. I love going through forests and nature itself, as it has nestled a nice little home within my heart. But if I were to accidentally walk into the location of a, Beedrill hive, I'm getting turned into a donut. And I have no interest in doing that. Even if I didn't, say walk into that hive, I still have to worry a little bit about Zubat and Golbat, who could catch me on a night out and try to drain me of all my blood. Golbat especially, since it is known to gorge itself on its prey's blood until it can't move anymore. Those are still all rare dangers at the very least, so nothing to worry about too much with them. The real dangers are actually the Pokemon that would seem very tame, such as Psyduck. If you put them under enough stress, watch them get a strong enough headache, and they will just start exploding things all around them. Even if we look at many of our other Pokemon, such as Victreebel, they're really only a danger if we delve deep into the forests or take a step off of the main tracks of the Safari Zone, which would also lead us to a very aggressive Nidoking that's going to think that we're trying to mac on their queen, and they're going to drive us into the dirt. That's not a joke, by the way. They will compete with each other for a mate, and if they think that you are trying to steal their mate away, the Nidoqueen, you will die. Again, though, I'm not going to go through every single Pokemon that is a threat, just the ones that I personally feel a little bit more concerned about, even if I have a couple of Pokemon to help keep me safe. What do you think of something such as, say, the Black Widow or a Timber Rattler? You have these oh my goodness, the worlds have mashed together. You have these animals that are very reclusive. They don't like to be around people. As such, you're not going to run into the dangerous Pokemon that often either. There's one route throughout the first 5 generations that you can find a wild Tyranitar, just to give you an idea. one route, and it's in Unova. And that's if you go through shaking grass, for that matter. And as much as Gengar is my favorite Pokemon, its line is absolutely terrifying, and is often only found at cemeteries and other areas where the dead may be buried, meaning I could go visit a family grave and end up with one myself, as Ghastly decides that it wants to suffocate me with its gas, or even take over my mind and body, as we see it happen in the Pokemon Adventures manga. Snorlax itself is also the only other real issue that I'm considering, as wherever it goes is wherever it stays, blocking roads until it decides to get up, or until it is motivated by enough food for it to then chase you at Mach speeds. And once it does find food, it is going to eat everything in sight until it is satisfied, meaning it could eat literally everything in the entire city, leaving you with nothing. That is something that happened in the lands of Hisui and was an actual threat. It would actually raid storage and mill grains, whatever you want, and, well, this was a time when people could not mass produce wheat or anything along those lines very easily. So, when winter rolls in, you're starving. As I went through the list, there are not a lot of Pokemon that are common and super benevolent within Kanto. Sure, the Machop are going to help out as, you know, they like to train, they like to help with a little bit of construction, the Geodude as well for that matter. Maybe a little Cubone would love to, you know, assist us, and I would actually love to have a Cubone as my partner Pokemon. But there aren't a ton that are out there that are actively looking to help other Pokemon or people in need. Some of the most friendly ones are still very much kept to themselves. At least though, Dragonite's a little bit of a toss-up. If you enter its territory, it might end your life. Otherwise, if you're just drowning, there's a chance it saves you, so coin flip. As for evil organizations, Team Rocket is easily one of the most intimidating groups of individuals. They are absolutely ruthless. They intend to steal Pokemon for profit and experiment on them. Their whole purpose is just simply to ensure that they just straight up profit from Pokemon no matter what it takes, taking advantage of them as much as possible, even if it kills the Pokemon. Depending on the types of media that you look at, they've managed to take over the legendary birds, create Mewtwo, and even force evolution onto Pokemon, making them rampage. And if you didn't know it, yes, they've forced Pokemon into evolution before their rise into the Johto region. Team Rocket can honestly vary in terms of their threat, depending on what version of them you consider. In the anime, they just exist, and I'm not talking about our Team Rocket trio, they're lovely. But they just, you know, they cause problems, but it's rare. In the games, of course, they have their moments as well, but they're honestly not all that ridiculous outside of them trying to take the Master Ball and attacking more often. So you have a little bit of worries when you're just walking down the street when it comes to Team Rocket. They don't really hide in the shadows, they're boisterous, so at least you'll know when they're considering coming after you. Meanwhile, if you look at the manga, Giovanni literally owns half of the Kanto region and had even convinced half of the gym leaders to betray the Pokemon League itself and instead seek out power under Team Rocket. That itself is beyond terrifying, and they even managed to fuse the legendary birds after they had lost control on Project Mewtwo and Mewtwo had escaped. All in all, Team Rocket is real rough to get past because they aren't just a bunch of dorks, as we see with a couple of our other evil organizations, meaning that we have some strong issues within the Kanto region to get past in terms of safety. And always remember, just because it's only set as a couple of days, maybe a month within the games, in real life, this is probably going on for months, if not years. And you're not the main character. You might, you don't get automatic main character protection here. You are just you in the Pokemon world. So if you can't train a Pokemon to make it strong enough to protect you, you're gone. Now, when it comes to the environments, I am reading them almost directly from Bulbapedia. Thank you, Bulbapedia. And in terms of environment, the Kanto region is at least pretty simple all in all. The Kanto region has a very temperate climate and not many notable landscape features, though this may be due to the region's origins in the Generation 1 games. The majority of the Kanto region are forests and plains. Many of the major Kanto cities are in the center of the region, with close access to virtually every environment such as the sea, mountains, forests, etc. Kanto is mostly dominated by land, but has a large bay in the middle, which opens to a sea in the southwest. Kanto has a contrast between urban cities and rural towns. Kanto has several mountain ranges, which are mostly in the northern and western Kanto. The Indigo Plateau and Victory Road mountain range divides Kanto from the neighboring Johto region. And honestly, when I do think of Kanto, I don't really think much about the environment itself, which feels a little bit ironic considering that many of these cities feel like small towns despite their descriptions, while they are surrounded by plenty of wilderness to enjoy and explore. Meaning that if I really don't want to deal with people, I can just pack my bags and go wander off and enjoy trying not to die while catching and training Pokemon. Now finally, we can talk about the cities and gym leaders, and no, I will at least try to be fair and not consider the Pokemon manga for this, with one exception. Especially as I have only read through the Red arc, and you should go watch my video on that because I want to cover more of the arcs. Anywho, in Kanto, I immediately think of Sabrina. She is evil in the anime, she's evil in the manga, and she technically is kind of rough around the edges in the games as well. I am sure that she will just take me, use her hallucinatory powers, and make me relive my high school days over and over and over and over again. And no, I wasn't really bullied in high school, luckily. That was in earlier years of my life. But at the same time, I would rather not go back. Honestly, even Lieutenant Surge feels like he would drop kick me mid-fight just because he can. I mean, I'm strong, but there's a difference between I'm strong and Lieutenant Surge, I'm strong! But overall, the gym leaders aren't actually that terrible. These cities aren't that far from each other, so at least it won't be a terrible travel between them on a journey, and there's at least Pokemon centers in full function. Now, the downside with the gym leaders is the fact that they don't do much. They stick to their gyms, they don't involve themselves with the conflict of the region, and as such, I don't feel safe. It's like getting a house in a bad community when the community is the entire region, because nobody does anything, they keep their eyes to the ground, and they pay no attention to the goings-on of anything. So much so that a child had to save the region. It also doesn't feel like there's too much to note with many cities, to be fair, as we also have a city that's an oddball city and a city that is our big center for shopping in pretty much every region. It's just how the games work. But with Kanto, I'd also be a little bit more wary of the water. I've covered whether or not you can survive the waters of every region recently, and there's a lot of risk involved because of the different water Pokemon that might float their way in, not just exist on the overall ocean or seas. I'd like to at least be able to escape the waters, and there's not a lot of cities that I can do that with here. So, right off the bat, I'm just gonna say Kanto is a 3 out of 10. Not terrible, but definitely has its downsides. Maybe once Team Rocket is gone, I hopefully survive the absolute mayhem they cause, and I'll be happier there. My rating might change later as we go through these regions, but let's move on to the Johto region. The region that started it all for me. I might be 26, yet my first Pokemon game was Pokemon Crystal, which would eventually make ripples through my life and introduce me to 2 of my top favorite Pokemon, Gengar and Suicune. But what about all the other Pokemon out there? Fearow is a little bit aggressive in terms of Pokemon, but I think we're fine if we stay away from its territory and from its food. We also get many of the other Pokemon that we have already encountered from Kanto here. Makes sense considering, I mean, they are one singular continent. Scyther is one that I would never want to run into by accident. They're quick to kill, moving faster than the human eye can keep up with, while being able to camouflage itself with its environment due to its green color, and then it also hates the color red. Look, I might not be red like my profile avatar for YouTube, whatever the heck you want to call it, but at the same time, I don't want to walk into the forest on an off day wearing red and I get turned into a freaking Lunchable. No, I am not the next snack pack getting sliced into a couple of pieces. I will pass. So, there are at least plenty of other nice Pokemon in this region that could help us out, such as Marill, who you'll find eating plenty of fish. Natu, who's a little bit more skittish than anything. Little Swinub digging up roots if you want to go to a little bit of a colder areas, and even Mantine, who would be plenty friendly. Though, I would be scared of the one random day that could happen where a Tyranitar does rise up from the ground and destroys everything. Same goes for Gyarados for that matter. And the more I think about it, the more I wonder, how high are insurance rates in Pokemon? Like, oh god, no, that can be mathematically done. That can actually be mathematically figured out. What are the insurance rates of Pokemon? I don't want to do that. Yeah, I don't. Don't torture me with more math, please. Let me have a little bit of a break. I'd honestly just be really happy with seeing some of my other favorite Pokemon here, such as Girafarig, since I absolutely love giraffes. They're my real-life favorite animal, and even have the chance of seeing Suicune in person. The only other big concern that I have is Lantern, considering all the power that it outputs while being so super deep dived into the hyper-compressed water could result in a random black hole being created. That doesn't sound appealing to me at all, and it shouldn't sound appealing to you either, but I can only hope that since it hasn't, caused Johto or Kanto or any other region to blip off the face of the planet, it's not something that will actually happen. But theoretically it should. Onto climate and geography, the Johto region, like its neighboring region Kanto, has a temperate climate. However, Johto's climate is a bit wetter than that of Kanto's. Johto is notably more rural than the Kanto region, which leans more towards to the urban side. The region has an abundance of water to the west and to the south, with Cyanwood City most likely being on a separate landmass. However, Johto is still dominated by land. The western parts of the region are mainly low-lying and forested and contain most of the region's population. Johto's ultra-modern Goldenrod City is found in the heart of the region on the coast. It is the technological, industrial, and economic area of the Johto region. Due to its centralized position in the region, many smaller but important cities and towns connect to the city. I would love to live in any of those smaller towns, as then I could have a lower cost of housing and then travel to Goldenrod when I need to in order to get all my goods, or have it shipped to me. I don't care. I have Pokemon. I'll go get it myself. There is one large mountain range encompassing almost the entire eastern half of the region, which separates Kanto and Johto and contains Mount Silver. Blackthorn City is nestled deep between the mountains and is very unique because it is a city for dragon tamers. Now, when I think of the mountains in Pokemon, in real life, I'd be tempted to go up mountains like Mount Everest and stuff like that, just because it is a trek and a half. It is a challenge, and I know I am physically relatively capable. It would be very difficult, even with me being more on the fit side, but it would be difficult. I mean, a lot of people die on Mount Everest, to be entirely fair. There's like a whole dead zone, tents and everything just left behind. It's terrifying, really. But nevertheless, I have Pokemon. I'd give it a shot. What? Who wouldn't? Like, here's my question to you. If you lived in the Pokemon world, what things would you be willing to do that you would otherwise feel unsafe doing in the real world? Like, would you go skydiving because you have an additional set of safety by having a good flying type Pokemon? Would you go diving into the water if you had a slew of water type Pokemon to accompany you? What things would you be more comfortable doing? And tell me that in the comments below, because I'm curious, and I know that not in a million years would I ever want to go into the waters of any Pokemon region, but if I have a good set of strong water type Pokemon, why not? Now, once again, fairly simple, and the information on our environment provides plenty of easy access between the cities, even cities that are a bit more safe from those watery portions, while also providing at least a few more of those friendly water Pokemon. Honestly, Ecruteak seems real attractive to me, especially if I get to see those fall colors. I wish I could judge food in these games, but these games didn't show that much in their early days, so I can't really talk about conveniences all that much. Finally, we have the gym leaders and convenience of everything. Truly. In the games, it is real nice to see that Lance seems to be on the up and up, eventually investigating and helping with the problems of the region, rather than purely allowing a child to handle everything while everyone else stays ignorant. The other gym leaders, just as in Kanto, feel very to themselves, though. I mean, Price is sitting there within, like, I don't know, a building's range of himself, of having an entire bunker of Team Rocket. He's in on it. You can't tell me otherwise. That man is in on it. Now, they might handle some goods and export some stuff, as all gym leaders do, and then they go on with their lives, which that also might be a really fun video. Try to explain why the gym leaders are gym leaders, what is their purpose, their value, what they export, or what goods or services they provide to the region. And yeah, if you haven't realized it, everyone does provide something to their region, and it's really cool when you think about it in depth like that. I'll give you a really basic example, and that's the fact that every region has a rock or ground type gym leader, with one exception, I believe, and that is because minerals are an amazing export. When you look at coal, when you look at iron, when you look at copper, all these things are amazing exports that give you a lot of money. And how do you think Giovanni, the 8th gym leader and the ground type gym leader, got all of his money? One of the exceptions we do have to this whole gym leader seclusion idea is Olivine City, as it seems like we get a little bit more intrigue through the Ampharos and the lighthouse situation. We really don't get many instances of Pokemon getting sick and needing more help. After all, the Ampharos needed actual medicine. You couldn't just walk it over to the Poke Center and boop, 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 and it was good to go. No, this is something that was infecting it that couldn't be just cured from that. This also, in turn, creates more interactions between Olivine and Cianwood, even if it is only a small showing of these interactions. I also suppose that Morty of the Ghost Gym believes that Suicune should be his, so he does try his hardest to gain the approval of my sweet, sweet legendary to no real avail. And he doesn't even really leave the city all that much either. After all, if I go to a region with super powered monsters, the best thing that I can have going for me is an interconnected group of leaders that are actually communicating with each other, which ensures a bit more of my safety. Because I have to grow up there, and I'm not going to be the best trainer. Like, ever, probably. Even if I am, I have to be helped and assisted and cooperate with others on that road to become the best. Like no one ever was. If I didn't say that, I feel like somebody in the comments would be like, you missed an opportunity, which, yes, I would have. Of course, this is probably my bias speaking right now, but Johto is feeling like a solid #1 spot for me right now. We'll see how that changes as we walk through more of the regions, though, and after all, a little more connectedness between leaders and some more safety would bring another region above this one and knock this one down rapidly. The trumpets are blaring within the Hoenn region. Sure, Poochyena and Mariana might try and rip me apart, as we see early in our introduction to the region and its professor, but all in all, they're not that much more of a challenge than a couple of wild dogs in the end, even if they aren't really dogs. Now, I know I'm staying far away from the caves due to Pokemon such as Mawile. That little Pokemon, while adorable, is one that is basically just a reverse anglerfish. The body of the Pokemon seems innocent and seems like it wouldn't try to harm you, so you might just try to walk past without thinking, only to be chomped by the hair, which is camouflaged by the darkness of a cave. The Aeron line is also a problem in this region overall, as they are often found eating iron, if not the railroads themselves. This massively messes with the infrastructure of the region and even fast transportation, which can be incredibly important in any region, not just for convenience, but also for safety. After all, not every Pokemon trainer and Pokemon can actually fly, nor does every Pokemon trainer actually have combative Pokemon. You have Pokemon breeders, you have people who are tending to farms, you have Pokemon contestants. These are people who are not ready for battle or defending themselves from Pokemon. You need this safety to save the very least. And I know you, not every single one of you, are going to become actual Pokemon trainers. You're going to take on one of these other beautiful professions. Speaking of professions, you should watch Pokemon Star Signs. It comes out once a month. It is a live stream, but there is a VOD playlist here on the channel that you can watch, where it is basically Pokemon and D&D mixed together and has all these fun little professions that my players are building their way through. And only one of them is a trainer. The other two are a Pokemon Ranger and a Grill Master, I guess. Carvana and Sharpedo are also massive issues. They are going to prevent a lot of shipments from getting into the region if they cross paths with any boats, tankers, anything else, you name it. And while there are plenty of sharks to avoid in the real world, at least those sharks aren't actively hunting down boats and ripping apart their hulls on the regular. I mean, even if we go back to Tentacruel and Tentacruel, they aren't actually ever really attacking boats themselves unless you aggravate them or build an entire, resorts in their land. That's just something I always bring up because everyone always goes back to, what about the Tentacruel that destroyed the buildings? No, that was all because people took a resort and decided to build it in Tentacruel territory and push those Tentacruels out of their home, which was incredibly unfair. I should also at this point at least mention other Pokemon that are beings of pollution, such as Grimer and Coughing, which aren't actually all that threatening in the end. Yes, they are very dangerous in terms of you don't want to touch them or breathe in fumes, but they only reside in areas where there's a lot of pollution already or are abandoned. And my asthmatic self isn't going anywhere near those areas without any special equipment anyway. In fact, Kanto, Johto, and other areas in general are reducing pollution in general within their regions, and they are seeing the Grimer population drop. Though, because they do deem it a living creature, wow, that is a whole conversation when it comes to some Pokemon, that they are keeping them alive and keeping certain areas dirty so that way, like, Grimer and Muck can continue to exist, or they export them out to Alola, of course, in which they become more benevolent and domesticated Pokemon. Even if we look at a Pokemon that we would see as incredibly dangerous, such as Deoxys, it's not actually that big of a deal. They don't usually always attack humanity. They just seem more confused or confusing in terms of what they really want, and Rayquaza sometimes flat out hates them and just decimates them immediately. Their whole relation gets a little confusing sometimes. Speaking of legendaries, Kyogre and Groudon only clash every 1,000 years unless some humans, not gonna name any certain individuals who dress in red and blue, decide that they want to cause them to wake up a little bit early. Otherwise, the two giants are pretty friendly, helpful, and actually considered kind deities by the people of Hoenn, at least in the past. It's just that when they clash with each other, that we get the cataclysmic events that could end the entire world until Rayquaza decides to step in and send them to bed. The real problem, and the number one reason why I would never want to step into the oceans surrounding Hoenn, is not because of Sharpedo. Because at least that Pokemon will drive at me 70 miles per hour and completely destroy me in a half second. I will be gone, no pain. The one that I fear is actually Gorobus. It takes actual joy in stabbing into foes and draining them in their blood as they suffer. And as such, I would rather not become the next Silly Straw Juice Box for this Pokemon. There are actually a lot of really good Pokemon out here in Hoenn that are going to be a great help for us. One that immediately comes to mind is actually Melodic. Reason behind that is simply that it serves to end quarrels and protect people and Pokemon. Downside is that they're not really naturally found in the wild. Snowrunt is also here. Gotta love my boy Snowrunt. Glalie and Frostlass, they're cool, but I love Snowrunt. One of my favorite ice types. Meanwhile, Trapinch, even though it'll try to kill me, is another favorite of mine. Now, same goes for Whismur for that matter, because I do love Whismur, but the problem with them is that they can actually scream loud enough that when they cry, they will make me deaf after incredible amounts of exposure, or at least long enough exposure in general. At their lowest, without crying, at their lowest, they sound like a motorcycle in terms of their decibel level, which can make you go deaf if you don't have any protection. And then it gets worse, because they usually end up scaring each other with their screams, making their raucous sound even louder, also that eventually my ears are just gonna bleed, so no thank you, and I'm staying far away from Whismur Cave. Of course, we could go all day, all night, about how every single Pokemon has the potential to put us in an early grave, although they are simply super powered animals that have wants, needs, and as such require space. Otherwise, they will attack in fear. So if you could just be aware of a Pokemon and their environments, where you would find them, which ones to avoid, then just like with animals, you'll be perfectly fine. After all, you're not just gonna go running through this Serengeti with no plan whatsoever, are you? For our evil organization, we do have Team Aqua and Team Magma to worry about, and unlike our previous regions, these teams are actually are much more larger and more obvious as a threat. Sure, Team Rocket was dangerous by all means, but at the same time, they weren't going to be dangerous until the very end, especially if they weren't properly taken care of. And even if you did, they never had control over Mewtwo. Maybe one day they would, but there would be many opportunities to stop them as long as somebody could put an end to Giovanni's reign. Meanwhile, with our evil teams here, they weren't just plotting to take over or create new Pokemon. They were in fact awakening the Primal Titans and planning to use them to reset the Earth itself, so that way they could heal it, reset it, remake it in their image, whatever you want. All of this, of course, becomes so dangerous that in fact, we get to see a version of themselves where they succeeded within the Team Rainbow Rocket episode of Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon. In fact, every single team leader ends up supposedly, or can be thought of, to have died when they succeeded on their original mission, including Archie and Maxie. And the only exception is technically Giovanni himself, considering the original Giovanni went into hiding after his defeat, and Team Rainbow Rocket Giovanni is actually an alternate universe Giovanni. And it's terrifying. When we look at the Pokemon Generations episodes, we see the moment right before Archie and Maxie would die. They had succeeded in their mission. They awoken, oh my gosh, Kyogre and Groudon, brought them to their full origin forms, and everything was being destroyed. They could not control these Primal Titans, and it would bring about the end of the world as we know it. It's not about stopping the evil team. It's about stopping what they create. That is the major threat. And in all honesty, Aqua and Magma aren't the most competent as a whole, with exception to a few characters within their ranks as we look at Pokemon Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire. And as such, they are a far more dangerous proponent in the immediate future, because it's their ignorance that brings out world-ending cataclysms. At least with Team Rocket, Giovanni was a slow-rolling boulder, no pun intended, that while his team was obvious, he was working in the shadows to create some terrible abominations. In the end, our evil team here wouldn't personally cause us too much trouble, but then, when those Titans clash, it's everybody's problem in the entire world. Now, let's separate from that and talk about the Hoenn region and its environment. It is a group of islands that boasts many dramatic environments, from rainforests to deserts. But its most striking feature is its abundance of water. 50% of it is actually water, to be, precise. Almost equal in size to the mainland, exemplifying the theme of the games. There are several large and populated islands of the mainland only accessible via the water routes, many of which are deep enough for diving. Much of the interior area is forested or mountainous, so most notable cities are found on the coastline. People who live in towns and villages in the mountain areas must adapt to the harsh environment. An extreme example of this is the inhabitants of Fort Tree City, who live in tree houses. This is in stark contrast to other regions in the Pokemon world, as noted by Ruby in Pokemon Adventures, who preferred Johto's many modernized cities to the wilderness and countryside in Hoenn. Hoenn has one active volcano, Mount Chimney, in the northwest of the region. The ash from Mount Chimney regularly falls on the nearby towns and routes. On the opposite side of the Hoenn region lies the volcanic or impact crater in which Sootopolis City was built in. Some of Hoenn's newly discovered Pokemon strongly reflect the influence of the primarily tropical environment. So, yeah, the volcano is a little bit of a worry, but there are plenty of Pokemon that can help keep people safe all in all, and many that live in those areas. So it isn't all that big of a deal, even if it does erupt. I just won't live in the areas near the mountain themselves, since they're so harsh and treacherous. Yeah, I might go visit the hot spring. That sounds really nice. I'd love to do that in real life one day. But even if the meteors happen a little bit more, which is already on the rarer side of things, just stay out of the Meteor Falls areas also. Personally, despite my love for the forest, being inside Fort Tree City just seems like bad news to me, even if it is a little bit more defended. We have Carvana in the water, which are unlike real piranhas and will rip us apart going into full-on feeding frenzies. Well, as long as they're in groups of 5 or more. Otherwise, if they are less than 5, they get very timid. Then we have Tentacool just floating through, and it is just a very wild area. But at least we have the Banana Dino Tropius here, and it might even share some of its favorite delicious Nana berries with us. If only we would be so blessed. Finally, the gyms and gym leaders alongside any other conveniences. Once again, it feels like many of the gym leaders in the Elite Four are keeping to themselves or their own agendas without being a part of the region. Of course, yes, every gym leader does contribute to their regions in some capacity, but if that's all that they do without actually assisting when major threats happen, then why are they here? Why is the Pokemon League paying them for? Wow, I feel like a horrible person saying that specific sentence, but they are supposed to be leaders. If they are just gonna sit and hold themselves away and not help when major cataclysmic events occur, then they are nothing more than a boss. There is a massive difference. You can't call yourself a leader if you're not amongst the people and actually doing the work yourself. I just don't see it. There is one exception though. One. As we have Watson in his prime, getting the job done. Back, if you look, or at least if you look back at C. Mauville, before it was just run into the water and turned into a nature preserve, quote unquote, that's just to cover up what it is, it was a place that would basically drive people into the ground. You weren't allowed to have Pokemon. You don't ask for time off or breaks. You work. And it is representative of some of the very, very dark company practices that do occur in places around the world and are shown in Japan as just a really bad thing, obviously. You're encouraged to work overtime, but not really get paid for it. You're not really, it's just a mess. Let's just put it that way instead of me going into the really depressing manner of it all. And what this place was doing is they were developing technology that were going to allow them to get far ahead of everybody else. In fact, they were originally supposed to be the ones that could have discovered infinity energy within Pokemon. And if a company like that ended up with infinity energy, the thing that Devon Corporation runs on and is the leading producer of technology within Hoenn, let alone the world for that matter, do you know what could have happened? Watson knew. And he was brandished as a traitor as he prevented that knowledge from getting out, destroyed the company, and saved Hoenn, let alone goodness knows what the rest of the Pokemon world would have been without his help. And now he just sits as a happy old man in his incredibly eco-friendly and energy-efficient city, just doing his best, and you would never know otherwise. One of my favorite gym leaders of all time right there. Even if we look at other forms of media when it comes to these guys, Norman is abusive in the manga. Steven Stone, who is part of Devon Corporation, ends up working with the Pokemon League here to capture Rayquaza, which ends up in a fight with them as they were using a prototype similar to AZ's full-on cannon that, you know, he used in the Great War to capture Rayquaza and draw its energy out, ultimately end up killing Zinnia's best friend as she tried to protect Rayquaza, as Rayquaza had chosen her as the original lore keeper, and then it was just to run those additional tests on it, and it's just a massive organization that isn't doing anything and is just contributing to the problems here, and it doesn't make me feel safe. Instead, it makes me want to stay super incredibly far away from them, as they are no better than a shadow government without the shadow. They're just a dark government. In this case, Hoenn might be incredibly low for me currently, but somehow, I'm not gonna put it at the bottom. I'm gonna put it at a 5 out of 10. The environment is harsh, the Pokemon League is sketchy at best, and the only thing that's saving me is the fact that there are plenty of Pokemon and the love for the water that I have that is safe. Not the ocean, but just how safe it can be everywhere else. Sinnoh, our 4th generation, our 4th region, and the wildlife here is a lot nicer. Sure, the pollen of Badoo is deadly, but only if it's intaking a ton of polluted water. So, our job is to simply keep the waters nice and clean, healthy, and unpolluted, which only serves to help us out overall. The only other real problems that will come after you, even if you don't enter the territory, is simply Scorpy, Drapion, Sneasel, and Weavile. They're all avid and aggressive hunters, especially the Sneasel line, which will group up to take down prey as large as Mamoswine. The next greatest threat would be if some idiot unsealed Spirit Tomb. After all, it is the combined 108 evil spirits that couldn't pass to the afterlife due to the weight of their sins. Instead, they had to sit on Earth and repent so that way their souls may be purified. Then they could pass on. They aren't much of an issue until then, in which case they will possess people, they will commit more war crimes, and then they will destroy everything until they are eventually stopped. I also guess Wish Cache could be a potential issue to infrastructure to some capacity, but they aren't really producing anything stronger than a 2.0 earthquake, which means that as long as you're not settling immediately within their vicinity, you're going to be fairly safe. But then we have our evil team, Team Galactic, who do all the normal stuff you'd expect of an evil team, and then decide to commit a little eco-terrorism for the funnies. That's also not really much of a joke. They literally do decide to bomb an entire lake in their search for the Lake Guardians and completely displace all the water and Magikarp in the area. Once they do achieve their goal, controlling the Guardians, summoning Dialga and Palkia, and trying to bring about an entire new universe, it gets really messy. And honestly, it doesn't really matter where you are in the world for this one either. In this case, this is an event that is involving the literal personification of time and space in the form of Pokemon and affects the multiverse itself. We're lucky for a number of reasons, one being that Giratina was angry enough to actually do something about it all. Like, if we look at the forms of media, our champion Cynthia got kind of beat down, unfortunately. We might have kind of stopped a number of things, but Cyrus still went with Giratina. Cyrus got dragged away by Giratina, and then Team Galactic fell. So, as long as Giratina shows up, we're perfectly fine. So you better hope we're in the universe where that happens. Otherwise, things could have gotten incredibly messy. In terms of Team Galactic, then, outside of the lake being blown up, their actions reverberate throughout the world and are pretty impossible to avoid if Giratina doesn't stop them. So, it kind of becomes null in terms of having to deal with them. At least they aren't mugging us at every turn, even though they did take over Valley Windworks for a while. Our climate and geography is a lot more detailed here as well. The climate of Sinnoh varies widely, and most of the region is made of mountainous or hilly areas. Unlike Hoenn, which is located in the south where the climate is warmer, Sinnoh is located on the northern boundaries of the world where the temperature is cooler. It is so cold in the northern part of the region that snow falls constantly. I'm not living there. I deal with enough snow living in Wisconsin. After 3 months, I'm done. I want the next season to be here. I know. It doesn't work like that, but I'm ready to move on. The harsh snow that blows down from the mountain's peaks not only makes the area very cold, but makes the routes in the area perilous to travel on. Cities such as Snow Point are completely covered in snow, and Pokemon who live nearby have had to adapt to the climate. Recently, the southern side of the region has also become cooler. Climate change is taking a toll. Areas such as Twin Leaf Town and Route 201 now have small amounts of snow on the ground. However, not all of the northern areas of Sinnoh are covered in snow. Due to dry environments and mountainous areas such as Dark Mountain, the small island known as the Battle Zone is subject to warmer climate. A constant sandstorm rages on Route 228 due to the flow of wind down through the mountains. Some of the southern areas of the Battle Zone are very tropical and contain dense jungles. The mainland features full land geography with only 5 water routes. Despite this lack of water routes, in contrast to the Hoenn region, Sinnoh is known to be rich in water. Rivers that originate from the highlands and mountains in the center of the landmass run through the region, passing many cities, towns, and routes and into the ocean. There are many lakes throughout the region, such as Acuity, Valor, and Verity. All of these factors create a tropical climate throughout the mainland. Many large cities settle on or close to the seaside. Some of them have large ports. So we're seeing where our cities are locating themselves. You're going to locate yourself nearby water. In addition, by having these ports, and multiple ports for that matter, we're getting and seeing where all of our goods are going to be imported or exported from in regards to this region and other regions, which can be massive. Further inland, there are many different climates due to the mountain zones. Different inland areas are subject to rain. This rain creates wetlands. Such areas may also be covered partially or completely by shallow pools of water. The soil in the wetland area is permanently saturated with moisture, which creates swamps, marshes, and bogs. In fact, Pastoria City was founded on the marshy soils that attracted wild Pokemon. Unlike other regions, Sinnoh is sometimes troubled by fog. Route 210 is often covered in a thick cloud that makes obstacles and trainers difficult to see. Fortunately for travelers, this can be easily cleared. HM. Boom. Gyms, leaders, and champion alongside the conveniences. I will admit that Volkner is kinda baller, having an entire city that is completely run on solar power, but the gym leaders still don't do anything outside of their cities or their major exports. Although, that might be simply because Cynthia has it on lock. Cynthia is the champion of the Sinnoh region who makes her first appearance in Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, the first female, non-playable character champion introduced in the Core Cities series. Cynthia is an archaeologist who investigates myths involving Pokemon and is described as mysterious, referring to herself as the researcher of myths. With her interest in mythology and history, she spends her time researching and exploring various sites associated with legendary Pokemon of the Sinnoh region. Because of this, Cynthia has a wide knowledge on Pokemon and their relationships with people, creating some theories of her own. She can get carried away with these topics, often talking for long periods of time or theorizing in places where she shouldn't be. Cynthia realizes this behavior, catching herself and apologizing whenever it does happen. She's just like me, for real, for real. Similarly, she speaks politely, frequently asking the player if they are doing well, and uses phrases such as pardon. Other little bits of info that would be fun for you to know about is that she knows how to play piano. Her home is often just not a mess, but is completely cluttered with papers and pages all over the place as she does her studies. And she was seeking out Arceus. She was the one to actually sit down and realize there has to be something more than the creation trio that we are now aware of. There is more out there. And so she led and found Arceus. Sinnoh is arguably an incredibly safe place as well. It's almost as if the more we go through our generations, we are slowly finding that our cities and leaders are becoming more involved with the community and making the regions safer overall. This kind of makes me want to place Sinnoh at actually number 1. Not gonna lie to you, I'm gonna bump Johto down, and Sinnoh's gonna sit at number 1. Take a plane to the Big Apple and touch down in Unova. Pokemon are first up as always, and I know I'm gonna have to be worried about getting mugged by Purloin and Liepard. I mean, literally, Purloin to Steel is 7/8 of Purloin's name after all, so I'm losing my lunch money to that Pokemon. Muna is cute at least, or Muna, oh my goodness, and will save me from nightmares I have as long as I don't go near it when it expels those nightmares as an explosive black mist. The only downside to Musharna then is that it might make my greatest nightmares come to life instead of just causing the explosion. So even the good Pokemon can be scary, who would have guessed? The Timber line is incredibly helpful when everything does start falling apart, so we have them to fall back on when we need buildings to be recreated and more. Then there's the Venipede line. I like Venipede. I really, really do. But the problem is, I am afraid of centipedes. They are one of my few genuine fears. And my first instinct is to grab something and kill them anytime I see them within my home. I genuinely fear them. And Venipede is amazing. It is a Pokemon, a not real thing, that I love because it took something I fear and made it look cool, thus making me love it even more. The problem, though, is if I am in the Pokemon world, I have to deal with a giant centipede. Then its evolution can move faster than I can run. Then its final form is multiple feet taller than me. Like twice my size. I'm not dealing with it. I'm not dealing with it. That is terrifying. That is a nightmare. That is Masharna made it my real life. Masharna made my nightmares into a reality if I go to Unova. Okay? Okay. I think we understand how I feel about the Venipede line if I had to live in Unova. But don't worry, it gets a little bit worse for everybody with the Sandile line because of course it does. They just swim through the earth like it's nothing. In addition, while they're going through the ground, they're gonna be able to, well, at least not Sandile, but it's, you know, final form can crush cars with its jaws. And lucky us, if I remember correctly, Trapinch through the Vibrava line and into our final form does not exist in this region. Because otherwise, Crocodile and Flygon will work together to hunt down prey. Flygon creates sandstorms. Krokorok can see, or at least Crocodile, Krokorok, whatever, can see through sand as if they were still just eagle eyes, as if it's not even there. They're the perfect tag team for hunting down Pokemon. Zora and Zoroark, I do feel bad for saying this, they are trickster foxes. They are kitsune by all means. And by being these types of creatures, mimicking people, mimicking children, taking on their forms, shape-shifting to get their food, that can be terrifying. You could be talking to somebody who is not who you think they are, all because it decided to take on their form. And there's gonna be at least one that is gonna have malicious intent. They are an intelligent creature. And it's why they are feared in Hisui and why they got kicked out. Why they ended up perishing and turning into their Hisuian form. Not that I agree with it, but that's why it happens. Reuniclus is not a danger to humanity. Reuniclus is actually just a personal danger for me because I'm an idiot. I have a tendency of knowing what the right decision is, but making the wrong decision anyway, as long as it only harms me. And in this case, it would only harm me if I decide to pop Reuniclus, or I guess it would harm Reuniclus, but it recovers rather quickly. But to pop Reuniclus's exterior and drink the funny liquid inside, that would grant me infinite knowledge and wisdom until it eventually kills me within probably a minute because it's incredibly toxic. I'd be willing to risk it. I like infinite knowledge. I'd do a lot of things for infinite knowledge. You don't want to go on a cruise ship anywhere near Unova or any other place that would have a Jellicent because Jellicent will drag cruise ships down alongside tankers and other ships actively deep into the ocean and use it as their habitat as they then suck the life and soul out of every single creature they come across. And if that doesn't get you, I guess we could talk about the gluttonous Electros, which will climb onto land in search of prey, grab you, paralyze you, drag you back into the water, and then will eat you. But enough about that, how about we move on to Team Plasma? They were a constant threat throughout the game and the region itself. The problem with them is not what they immediately did, but rather how they were so covert in everything that they were doing. How they planted seeds of doubt into the public, and then how they eventually managed to sneak attack with the use of an entire massive, larger than the Elite Four's home-based Pokemon League, hidden castle that rose from the ground. They fully attacked, caught everyone off guard, and were even able to defeat Champion Alder while obtaining full control of one of the legendary dragons thanks to N under the influence of Ghetsis. And of course, Ghetsis is by far one of the most evil individuals of all of Pokemon, no matter what form of media that you look at him with. When it comes to the gym leaders of Unova, though, they are actually communicating. They're working together beyond what their exports are. They're banding together and did so when this massive event occurred. Arrived at this scene to help fight off the 7 Sages, Team Plasma Grunts, and keep the region safe from the very obvious and apparent threat. And it was by far the first time we ever get to see something like this. And they are even working as hard as they can throughout each of their cities to help fight against Team Plasma whenever they do become a threat in their region. Again, communicating, speaking to each other in person, that is massive in terms of safety for a region. These are our gym leaders. When we look at all the shops and places of convenience throughout Unova, it feels a little unfair because it's right around this area that we start to see Pokemon spread their wings more and more, reach into the cosmetics of Pokemon, reach into the side stories and missions more, or even into the non-essentials in general. And yes, I know they did that with Omega Ruby, Alpha Sapphire, but again, that was after this. It really sticks once we would reach the next generation, but for now, we can move on to the climate and geography. Unova is divided by 2 rivers that lead into an ocean to the south of it. These rivers cannot be surfed on, with the exception of the river directly below Village Bridge. It divides Unova into central and eastern peninsulas and a western landmass. The waters there might just be too fast for just an idea as to why you can't surf on them. These 3 landmasses are connected by 5 bridges: Sky Arrow, Driftvale, Tube Line, Marvelous, and Village Bridge. The eastern part of Unova is further divided by mountains that makes a southeast part and northeast part. The southeastern part is important to trainers who want to compete in the Pokemon League, since 2 gyms are located there. But the northeastern part is not, since there are no gyms there and it mostly has tourism, as evidenced by the amount of people speaking foreign languages. Further away from this bundle of towns is where the Pokemon League is located. Interestingly, the northeastern part is the only place in the region to find Pokemon species foreign to Unova, at least outside of swarms. The central peninsula of Unova consists of 2 of the largest cities in the Pokemon world, Castelia and Nimbasa, as well as Opelucid City further north, all of which contains gyms. Every bridge in Unova connects to the central part of the region from either the east or the west. The western side contains medium-sized towns and more varied landscapes, but it also has 3 gyms there, making it another destination to visit for any Pokemon trainer. So, again, if you're becoming a Pokemon trainer, you have a lot of running around to do, and you're going to be running through all of Unova no matter what, with exception to that northeastern part. Unova is a mixture of urban and rural land. The region features 21 settlements which reflect the diversity of the region. Many cities have buildings that resemble real-world buildings, such as Striation and Castelia. However, some cities remain the way buildings in the past do, such as Humalau City, which has mostly wooden buildings on platforms above the ocean. Castelia, a sprawling metropolis, is one of the largest cities in the Pokemon world. November Town, which is inhabited by the Pokemon expert Professor Juniper, is smaller and quieter. Black City, a version-exclusive city, Unova's landscape also features several forests, one of which is the also version-exclusive White Forest. They have a desert, a magnetic cave, and areas where the move dive can be used outside of battle. Although Unova appears in some ways more technologically advanced than the previous regions, this development is not spread across the whole of the region, for there are several aesthetic differences in the region depending on the version. In Pokemon White and White 2, these changes make the geography more rural looking, while Black 2 changes are more modern or technological in appearance. The climate of Unova, unlike other regions, solely depends on the time of the year. Unlike previous regions where climatic change was experienced locally, where it would just always be snowing in one part, always, super sunny in other parts, or rainy, Unova actually has national seasonal change throughout all 4 of the seasons. Now, those occur during a 30-day cycle, but that wouldn't be the case for real life. Otherwise, the place would be in absolute destructive turmoil. So we can at least knock that off of the equation onto whether or not we like being here. The beauty of Unova is that it actually has a climate, though, in the end. And it really is the only one to have a shifting seasonal climate, rather than a climate that is determined on location and has a couple of different weather things going on. It's less that, in the end, Unova scares me. It's more that its surrounding waters, its desert, its extreme Pokemon all scare me. Every region, though, does have their scary Pokemon. Every region has their bad sections, but the extent to which Unova has its sections makes me wonder just how expensive it would be to live there. How do the exports and imports even work? How many ships are constantly lost at sea? What keeps Unova alive? And maybe it's simply because they're large enough and varied enough seasonal climatic region that they are being self-sufficient with themselves with very few imports. Either way, mix that in with any of my other concerns, and we're gonna find that Unova is at an 8 out of 10 for me. It's really low. Kalos, home of the Megas, and soon to have its own Legends game, which I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to be no live streaming every bit of on this channel, and then making plenty of videos on in order to break it all down. Short videos, long videos, you name it, so be here for it. I'm excited for when it comes out. Also, same goes for Pokemon Day. Now, with the Pokemon here in Kalos, we have a few major problem children here that scare me. The Hoenn line, for example. Whether you look at Hoenn, Doublade, or Aegislash, they are Pokemon that, when you hold them, they will wrap themselves around you with their tassel thing, and they will drain your life force. But by the time it becomes Aegislash, or Aegislash, whatever, I'm going to say it however I want to, it was known to have been the one to choose the next king, while also having another story that states how an entire kingdom fell because of it after it had drained a king's life. My suspicions is that knowing that this line can control a person, their mind, their body, that they likely took over a king and ran an entire section or kingdom or whatever of Kalos until eventually it was done and the whole kingdom fell with the king. That's already a strike one. I don't know if I can trust the history of Kalos in its entirety anymore. I don't know if we should trust it, and maybe we'll get some light onto that in Legends ZA, we might not. Who knows? I mean, it is just Lumio City after all. Up next, there's Inkay and Malamar, which of course everyone knows that Malamar itself can be incredibly intelligent, can be incredibly evil, and is said to have one, if not the strongest hypnotic powers of all psychic type Pokemon. As such, they can have the intelligence to run entire machines that humans have, having similar to human intelligence themselves or smarter than humans, and overall are an absolute menace, as nothing is really stopping them from hypnotizing you and then eating you alive. We have more cargo problems over the sea, as we have Dragalge out there, which is actively incredibly territorial, and if anything, even if it has a steel hull, starts to come on through, it will spit its incredibly acidic poison at the hull, and it will melt the whole thing apart. It's gonna drop into the ocean, and everyone on that ship is likely gonna be gone, because if it can break a steel hull with a little bit of poison, there's nothing stopping it from doing it to everybody else or any of the rescue ships that, or the rescue boats that are gonna be on it, unless hopefully you have some Pokemon to help keep you alive. And then there's Gourgeist, because you're not safe on land still, as it turns Halloween into an actual night of terror. Because what Gourgeist will do, depending on its size, will actively pretend to be a child or an adult and take you away. Or children away. It doesn't matter. They have their preferences, and they will take people away to never be seen again. And it takes pleasure, actually, in killing. It wraps you up, and it sings to you as it drains your life force. And it'll sing as it goes up and down the roads. I love Halloween. I do. It's my favorite. But that ruins it pretty quickly if I'm in the Pokemon world. I don't want to be anywhere near something like that. Now, with Team Flare, they're very goofy on the surface, but overall pretty effective all in all. They feel like they belong in 1933 without saying anything else, which we'll get to their dastardly deeds later, but they caused blackouts by taking over the power plant, took over the Pokeball factory, and even had Lysander on their side, which was at the head of the tech industry. I mean, Lysander had them on his side, let's be real. The major problem here, though, is that they could have blocked all forms of communication since everyone was using holocasters, which was designed and distributed by Lysander. In addition, they probably have the darkest plan in all Pokemon, whereas our other leaders decided to revive ancient beings for personal means, maybe take over the world. Lysander here decided that anyone who doesn't have money, specifically $5 million in order to join Team Flare, or doesn't fit within his perfect idea of how people should act, should die. And then everyone else who lives will actually become immortal through the revival of the original great weapon that AZ had created. The plus side is that even though he technically succeeded in his plans within the game himself, he still ends up getting blasted by his own machine, and the small city that it all happens in is the only one that is actually affected directly by the resultant blast. All because there just wasn't enough energy at that time, at least. So all in all, a team that is more terrifying during the build-up rather than during the finale of it all. At least in the side games and in the anime, Lysander does way more, and it takes far more than just our main character to put an end to his reign. Which will lead me to actually talking about the gym leaders a little bit earlier, as Lysander Labs was destroyed when the giant rock is actually something that Lysander created to mimic Zygarde, transformed into a giant copy of Zygarde. Wow, I really got ahead of myself. During forming a more perfect union episode, Lysander was revealed to have survived a previous incident and used the giant rock to battle Ash, Elaine, Malva, Steven, Professor Sycamore, Diantha, and all of Kalos' gym leaders. Eventually, the giant rock was destroyed when Squishy, a Zygarde cell, and Z2 transformed into Zygarde complete form and attacked it with Core Enforcer. Lysander was engulfed by the attack and seemingly died as well. Afterwards, Malva promised to hunt down the other Team Flare members and afterwards turn herself in as well. Malva, one of the members of the Elite Four. The sheer amount of power that Lysander exerted with his technology, planning, and just his general aptitude as a trainer is beyond what we see of pretty much every single other evil team leader in Pokemon. Lastly, the geography of Kalos varies greatly within this region, so let's go through it. The region is naturally bordered by a vast ocean to the west and northwest, and the eastern and southern borders are formed by mountain ranges. These borders give the region its signature star-like shape, as a large peninsula reaches out to the sea in the northwest, creating one point, and elsewhere the coastline, mountain ranges, and rivers create the remaining 4 points. Kalos is made up of 3 different distinct divisions, all with their own unique characteristics in both geography and Pokemon: Central, Coastal, Mountain. The bustling Lumio City is located near the point where all 3 divisions meet. Central Kalos is located in the centric and southern parts of the region. The area is dominated by large forested plains with multiple rivers crossing it with very few changes in elevation. Several towns are surrounded by walls of some sort, and there are also many old castles and chateaus. Many important human settlements and landmarks are located here, such as Vanderbilt Town, Santaloon City, a portion of Lumios, and Parfum Palace. The coastal Kalos is located by the vast sea in the western part of Kalos. The mainly explored area is a strip between mountains and sea. This area is dominated by rocky shores in the southwest and lush beaches and forests in the northwest. Most human settlements are located by the sea. The peninsula in the northwest is known for its menhir stones. There are many important locations such as Reflection Cave, Geosense Town, and Shalar City with its Tower of Mastery. Mountain Kalos is located in the eastern reaches of the region. The area is largely mountainous, and the temperatures tend to be cooler than in the other parts, with some routes and settlements having snow covering them. To the north, there is a marshy area that is said to be haunted. However, the settlements are plentiful, and there are some important landmarks, such as the Kalos Power Plant that is built on the harsh wasteland, the Pokeball Factory in Laver City, and the Pokemon League itself. Kalude City is located outside the 3 divisions and is only reachable by train from Lumio City, and is relatively isolated from the other parts of the region, being completely surrounded by mountains. So, when it comes to Kalos, it's honestly a pretty great place all in all, lots of coffee places for me to enjoy because I love my coffee. I'm drinking coffee, you know, usually when I record these, even though I should have water and maybe some lemon water or whatever else. I digress. We also get plenty of goods, bakeries, and I'll even consider the fact that Clement is around, as he is a man of science, and I appreciate him and all the progress that he made within the world of Pokemon. The major, and I mean really major drawbacks, are some of the most evil or dangerous Pokemon in existence with Hoenn and EK lines, in addition to the fact that the reach of Team Flare was so deep that it even reached into one of the Elite Four. So it is nice to know that the groups or the leaders of this region are gonna band together, but you gotta try and survive Kalos. You gotta try and survive the events of Team Flare because it reached everywhere within that region. So you might have a great time until you just suddenly die. Gotta say, that puts Kalos super low on my list at a 9 out of 10. I didn't want to put it that low, but there's far too many factors, too many risk factors that are completely out of my control that just make me slam it down. Alola, and welcome to Alola. The Pokédex here makes me smile and fear for my life. Pancake-loving Raichu, beautiful. Gives me life. Honestly, I'd want that as one of my partner Pokemon. The Grubbin line, fantastic until Vikavolt decides it wants to evaporate your entire body. Muck is actually pretty amazing here, as it has been domesticated and is now being used and partnered with to get rid of all the extra pollution that this land had a problem with. The only problem then is that if it's not continually fed properly, when it does get hungry, it might eat your couch. Then, if you're scared of spiders, Araquanid is definitely not for you. At least they're not super common, but they are a, 5'11" spider that also has roughly 2 to 3 feet in terms of their bubble that is strong enough for them to use to headbutt creatures and keep them trapped inside as they eventually drown and are used for food later on. And then you get Palossand and Delmines. Palossand being able to be completely formed from all the sand and lost souls that make up its body, that it can shore up, pun, to create its body into a much larger state, becoming so large that it can actually engulf buildings if it really wanted to, and take over the Alola region, as it then uses the bones of its prey as firearms, not firearms, as ammunition, rather. Its big old towers are firearms for that matter. And Delmise, who is created when the soul of departed sailors attaches themselves to drifting seaweed or rotting seaweed for that matter, and it's usually made up of the parts of the ship that are now its body, the anchor, the wheel, and despite that, it is the seaweed itself, as it then possesses it and grows itself, fights whale lords, and will attack humans. Territorial, incredibly powerful, over 10 feet tall. The only reason why I blitzed through the majority of those is because I've talked about them all previously, and you really should go check out some of my other videos. After this one, I'll give you a recommendation at the end of this video. I will admit this, though, that despite all of the fear that exists within Alola from the Ultra Beasts or even some of the Pokemon that are normally residing here, there are honestly a ton of Pokemon that are available that are kind, or at least relatively very helpful. Whether we're looking at the totem Pokemon who are guardians, or even the gods that are the Tapus who work closely with the Kahunas on their islands. Also, I do have to take an opportunity to gush about the variants and Beware, because I love the Pokemon introduced in this region. I think Alola has some of the best Pokemon, bar none. And that's coming from someone whose favorite is Gengar. I just think Alola had the perfect touch, and the regional variants kickstarted something that sparked creativity throughout the Pokemon community throughout all these years. It was one of the best decisions that the company had ever made in regards to Pokemon in general. I also will say, Beware, cuddly, strong, powerful, And one of my favorite scenes in all of Pokemon, even though I haven't really watched 90% of the anime or movies, is seeing Beware fight Pheromosa. There is something about that scene in general that I love with all of my heart. And most of the variants are just better. Not even in terms of like, oh, they're better design. I mean in terms of their personality. They're about the same as they were before, so they're kind still, or they're more controlled. The Alolan Raichu doesn't say anything about it losing its temper and having to discharge its electricity anymore. Then you have Diglett and Dugtrio, which just get hair for that matter, not a big deal. Vulpix goes to live on its own on the mountains and become a snow deity for that matter for a while. Muck is no longer an absolute danger to society, so on and so forth. It's almost like these small islands are able to create a sense of belonging, or create a sense of, oh, these are the problem Pokemon, this is how we stay away from them, or this is how we nurture them so that way they do not continue to be a problem. Now, from here in, I did realize that talking about the land itself is probably a better idea as the second topic to talk about in each region. And Alola is a little bit of a doozy, who would have guessed, with a couple of islands that are vastly different. The Alola region consists of 4 main islands, and you should think about which one you'd want to reside on. Mele Mele, Akala, Ula Ula, and Pony. It also includes one artificial island, of course, being Aether Paradise, described as Very Large Floating Structure, or VLFS, and Pokepelago, a group of small, uninhabited islands. People can travel between the islands via boat, Pokeride's Charizard Glide, and Mantine Surf. It is not possible to use the Pokeride's Lapras Paddle or Sharpedo Jet or any field moves to move between the islands. All 4 natural islands are, to an extent, forested and mountainous. Most of these islands, cities, and towns are on the coast, with the notable exceptions of Iki Town and Paniola Town. The reason for this, and this is also going to relate back to Australia, when humans first started to settle in places, you stayed, or at least humanity stayed, alongside the coasts. Why, you might ask? The reason is because the food was, quote-unquote, infinite. If you can just create a fish hook, which the first one was created an incredibly long time ago. I don't remember when it was created, but it was made of compressed seashells. Really cool. You just make a fish hook, fish, eat your food, and then continue moving on along the coast and with your life until you find a place that you would like to settle. And you would never, ever run out of food, or at least that's how it was seen. So, why wouldn't you stay along the coast? Unless you're allergic to shellfish, in which case, sucks for you, I guess. Poor people. I mean, I guess you could move more inland then, and that's why you would get some more of those more inland cities. But it's why places like Australia, other than its general habitats, are more coastal. A lot of those scary animals that are going to rip you apart that aren't even that dangerous. I mean, there are some dangerous ones, of course, you know, but a lot of those scarier ones exist more mainland Australia. They are creatures that are found in the wide expanses of mileage or kilometers in between the cities, towns, and general settlements. So, Alola likely started off doing something incredibly similar. Routes are relatively developed here compared to other regions, with several of them having their own Pokemon centers in addition to residential buildings. Though steeped in nature, Mele Mele Island in the northwest of the archipelago has the least extreme environments. It is home to Alola's largest settlement, Hau'oli City. Its routes gently slope up towards the center of the island to form a gradual mountain, and on top of which are the ruins of conflict. A notable Mele Mele Island landmark is 10 Carat Hill, which was formed out of an underwater volcano and has an open-air hollow in the middle, itself resembling a volcano. Really tripped up on the last word there, huh? Akala Island in the northeast of the archipelago contains Alola's only active volcano, in Wheeler Volcano Park. It also has the most settlements of the 4 natural islands. Its largest city, Heahea City, boasts several huge resort hotels, such as the Hano Grand Resort, which has its own beach and golf course. A notable Akala Island landmark is Brooklet Hill. which has cascading waterfalls that give off the impression of a terrace field. The island is also containing a rainforest known as the lush jungle. Ula Ula, in the southeast of the archipelago, is the largest of Alola's islands. It is also the most varied in terms of weather and terrain, with significantly rougher terrain areas than other islands. For such a large island, it has few settlements: Meili City, the largest city in Ula Ula; Tapu Village, destroyed by the Tapu a long time ago, Tapu Bulu, which just contains a Pokemon Center; and Po Town, which is occupied by Team Skull. These settlements all sit in the shadow of a contiguous mountain range in the heart of the island, which includes 3 mountain peaks and a harsh desert. On the southwest coast of the island is a large lagoon with breakable rocks that the Pokéride Sharpedo Jet can break through. Notable Ula Ula Island landmarks are the Lake of Moon and the Lake of Sun, both perfectly circular lakes that have special connections to the legendary Pokemon of Alola, Solgaleo, and Lunala. Pony Island, in the southwest of the archipelago, is the most sparsely populated of Alola's islands. It only contains 1 settlement in Ancient Pony Path. However, the Seafolk Village is a gathering location of seafaring people. I'm going to say it right now, I would not be a part of that. I get seasick, I get motion sick. Sometimes I get motion sick while driving. Very rarely, but I do. I would not survive as a seafaring folk. Similar to the battle zone in Sinnoh, it is full of rugged and harsh environments, though its coasts are fairly flat. The island is mostly mountainous and rocky, in part due to the sprawling vast Pony Canyon, described as a natural trial site. That takes up over half the island's land. Executor Island, a smaller uninhabited island that was once its own trial site, can be accessed in Seafolk Village. Aether Paradise, just west of the center of archipelago, starkly contrasts with the natural islands. It is strikingly modern, with a huge building in the center that serves as both the main area and the headquarters of its owners, the Aether Foundation. Behind this building is a sprawling mansion that serves as the office and residence of its head, Lusamine. Among Alola's 4 islands is another smaller archipelago known as Poképelago, and it's uninhabited by people. Despite this, Mon has made it a paradise for trainer-owned Pokemon and has several different islands and attractions for their Pokemon to take part in. Or, basically be slaves. I mean, not slaves. They crave the mines. Climate. Alola has a warmer climate than other regions, being more tropical, similar to its real-life counterpart of Hawaii. For example, a thriving rainforest grows on Akala Island. The Pokemon themselves have also adapted to Alola's tropical atmosphere. The biggest example being the Executor that grow on Pony Island, who have reached lengths other Executor are unable to reach due to the amount of the sun that shines over the islands. These Executor match the flora that grow on the islands. However, Mount Lanakila, Alola's highest point, constantly experiences snow and hail due to its high altitude. So, 2 bits of fun information. 1, trees will compete with each other for sunlight, reaching higher and higher and higher in order to outcompete each other. But sometimes, or typically, plants of the same species will actually not compete with each other. Despite all of that, we can assume that some of the Executor, being a little competitive, will continue to reach heights as high as they can, for lack of a better word, because it's just them on this island, and they have a little bit more of a conscience proven. Then, when we look at Mount Lanakila, it is very similar, or is just a parallel to Mount Mauna Kea, which is a real-life mountain in Hawaii, the highest point, actually. They are parallels. That is also, similar to Lanakila, seen as more of a holy place, like at least religiously, seen as a sacred place, and it explains why Vulpix goes from just an ice type to an ice fairy type when it's here in Alola, because it takes residence up there, and the fairy typing is typically synonymous with ideas such as life, celestialness, and just fairy tale mythology in general. Each of the natural islands also experiences a wide variety of weather conditions. For example, Ula Ula hosts environments with harsh sun, extreme sandstorms, and frequent rain, in addition to the snow and hail on Mount Lanakila. Executor Island is known to have common rain showers as well. These often result in either rainbows during the day or meteor showers during the night when the rain clears. So, honestly, it seems really nice. Out of all of them, it'd probably be Melee, or I always forget which one actually has, it'd probably be Melee, or even Ula. It just feels proper to my brain. It just attracts me all in all. But that's not to say I wouldn't visit the other islands were I to live in Alola. And looking at our evil team, the actual best team in all of Pokemon, I will fight anyone who says otherwise, is Team Skull. Sure, they might not be the most effective. Sure, they might just be a bunch of misfits and aren't actually evil, but they are my absolute favorite team. They weren't trying to take over the world themselves. They were just trying to live their own lives. They didn't fit in with the other residents of Alola or their families, and instead had their own community, one that would eventually fall apart, even leaving them without a Pokemon Center that is actually governmentally properly run. They're all in all just incredibly misguided individuals that need a good hand to guide them. Otherwise, they're just getting pushed down further and further. And the greatest evidence of this is how Guzma served Lucamine's wishes and would simply do what she wanted him to do. She lost her husband, became obsessed with getting him back, which evolved into her obsession with the Ultra Beasts. And what didn't help actually is the fact that Faba knew where Moan was and was just constantly lying with Lucamine, allowing her to fall further and further into her pit of insanity. And if he hadn't done that, there might not have been an actual villain in all of Alola. Like, not a true villain. Though, at the same time, we might not have gotten the redemption of Team Skull for that matter. The real threat would simply be this. Can you survive the Ultra Beasts? Will you be so unlucky to be there in the immediate drop zone of an Ultra Beast? Which one will it be, and can you survive their onslaught? We can answer this question simply by moving along to our analysis of the Kahunas and the islands of Alola overall. The Kahunas are chosen by the Tapus, and then all the trial captains serve under the Kahunas, of course. In fact, the leaders of Alola as a whole are arguably the most communal. They tend to interact and visit each other often, communicate regarding issues both big and small, and even adjust their trials as appropriate, while even being there during each other's trials to help observe those trials, the individual taking part in them, and their success or failure, and how to actually help these new trainers grow. Because of this, when the Ultra Wormhole started opening up and the beasts started to appear everywhere, whether you're looking at the games or the anime, it does not matter, the leaders of Alola were able to stand out together and act as cohesive units despite being separate on each of their islands, keeping the people of Alola safe. And that's mind-blowing. I love it. That is so incredibly cool to me. And while I might be incredibly afraid of the water in Alola, it has a lot of methods in which they're able to keep people safe. They even keep Bruxish nearby on the beach in order to deter more dangerous Pokemon from getting any closer, since the people of Alola love their surfing. It's really the only region that actually has beach precaution. So, even those other beach-going Pokemon that are threats to humanity that might honestly end the lives of anybody that comes near them, they're not actually that big of a deal because of these safety precautions. And as such, unless the next couple of regions really pull something off, Alola is becoming number one. Galar. Oh boy, Galar. Look, I'm gonna be real honest with you. I don't have a very positive outlook on how attractive Galar will be to live in, but we're gonna give it a fair shot. The Galar region is an expansive region, including varied environments such as idyllic, whatever that word is, countrysides, contemporary cities, and snow-covered mountains. Galar comprises a long mainland area as well as an outlying island area, the Isle of Armor, east of the mainland. The extreme south of the Galarian mainland includes the Crown Tundra. This area is isolated from the rest of the mainland by a tall mountain range, which extends north along both mainland coasts. However, the Galarian train system allows for travel through these mountains. Just north of the southern mountains, in the broad valley between its coastal spurs, lie the dense slumbering Weld and the nearby village of Postwick. This valley also marks the beginning of a long stretch of plains dotted with hills, ending just north of Hammerlock, that cover the majority of mainland Galar. These plains are home to 2 of the 3 main cities in Galar, Hammerlock and Motorstoke. Various arid, rocky environments sit at the northern edges of the plains, including the cliffs outside Stowonside on Route 6 and the ruins south of Circhester on Route 8. In northwest Galar, surrounding Balonlea, is the Glimwood Tangle, a thick, gloomy forest. East of this forest lies a broad tundra that includes the city of Circhester and a range of snowy and jagged mountains that separates the metropolis of Winden from the rest of Galar. The Isle of Armor sits in the sea to the east, closest to the mainland town of Spikemouth. Much of the isle consists of lush forests, caves, rolling hills, and tree-filled valleys that rise from its long beaches. Despite being an island, it is connected to mainland Galar's train system with dedicated flying taxis. Looking at the Pokemon, Galar is described as an incredibly harsh environment. I will say, to give benefit, that if you stay within the cities of Galar, you are going to be almost perfectly fine. But as soon as you look out over the Pokemon and what exists out in the environment, we start to have a lot of problems. Because all of the water Pokemon you would be worried about from all of the other regions are here, including some new Pokemon that have adapted to this environment and can be incredibly territorial, aggressive, or just destructive in their own ways. For example, considering the harsh environment, it was so polluted at one point that Weezing actually developed its body so that way it could purify the poisonous gas that it contains rather than intake poison gas and create more. It's kinda like osmosis in this manner. With regular Weezing, there's pure air outside and it needs to balance itself by releasing toxic gas while continuing to intake fumes from garbage and other toxic or biohazardous sources. Meanwhile, in Galar, there's enough toxic gas in the air that Weezing can't actually release any. So instead, it takes all of the toxic gases that it normally would eat and purifies it, then releases it. This is actually also where Zigzagoon originates from, and its final evolution, Obstagoon, directly states how Obstagoon's evolution is a result of the Galarian Linoon's survival instinct being honed from competition and harsh conditions of the Galar region. So, that's about as direct as we can get, saying just how harsh it can be here. We get Choodle and Dreadnought, which are fairly unfortunate considering they are known to be incredibly tough Pokemon to train, and trainers will end up releasing them back into the wild. Typically, trainers that don't listen to this whole idea that they're tough to train can't handle them, release them, and then Dreadnought is actually an incredibly fast, snapping turtle in lore, which is problematic. And then, of course, what can be worse than one giant centipede? 2 giant centipedes! Yes, because not only do we have the Scolipede line, we also have Centiskorch, who creates flammable gases by fermenting the body, or the food in its body, oh my goodness, and then burns these gases through the heat-generating organs along its underside. This results in the overflowing flames on either end of its body, which can reach temperatures of almost 1500 degrees Fahrenheit, 800 degrees Celsius. As shown in the manga, the flames on its head can turn off. Due to its violent and belligerent nature, Centiskorch will attack anything that comes near it. When in battle, Centiskorch will rear up and use its long, hot body to attack, either by slamming its searing belly into opponents like a whip or constricting them with its body. Scolipede is the natural predator or prey of Centiskorch, depending on who wins the territorial fight. Kaiju matches between 2 of my greatest fears. Well, sorry, 1 of my greatest fears, but there are 2 of them, and they're giant. Beautiful. By the way, let's talk about what happened to me on stream at one point, because I talked about my fear of centipedes and everything like that, and then a good member of the community, I don't want to drag them by any means, this is more funny than anything to me, but PV2 decided like, oh, have you heard, or not even have you heard, they just like, oh yeah, the Arthur Akira, that would be a really bad idea to try and attack that thing, because I stated that my immediate reaction when I see a centipede is to kill it. I don't go into a blind rage or anything, I just go, I cannot take my eyes off of you and I'm going to kill you. That is it. They're like, you probably don't want to do that. I look up the R3 Okura, look it up, and I cringe in my seat. I can feel my body crumpling in on itself looking at it. And it's a millipede, but it was a giant millipede that existed when there was more oxygen in the air, which meant that there were far more insects, or, well, not even far more insects, but insects in general were a lot larger. Literally think like, I guess Pokemon large. You know what I mean? Literally just Pokemon large. And it's because their bodies could actually use the oxygen in a different way. If we were alive in that time, we would not be that large. And then plants came in and took up too much of the oxygen, and then there was a great dying, and then we were on to the next era. But nevertheless, that is terrifying, and I'm greatly afraid of that creature. And Centiskorch and Sizzlipede, and I mean, those are both the same line. You know what I mean? I'm flustered because I'm afraid. And just wait though, we're not done with the threats of Galar just yet. Galarian Stunfisk is a living Pokeball bear trap specifically evolved to clamp down on anything or anyone that would grab or be interested in a Pokeball, otherwise known as humans. We are its prey. It has specifically evolved to hunt us down, and it's happy about it too. Then there's Galarian Corsola and Cursula, who will take your life energy if you so much as accidentally click them, which isn't hard since they just kind of look like regular rocks until they decide to move, or until you move them, or until they gather under a full moon or under the moon in general as they reach up towards the sky. Hatchrim and Hatterene, if your emotions are too strong, whether they're positive or negative, doesn't matter, they will hunt you down and vibe check you from miles away. If they existed in the real world right now, they would be beating me down and ripping me apart with their claws at this exact moment. And then let me just read you Shiinotic's info. Shiinotic has been shown illuminating the spot and gills on its mushroom. This strange light can confuse people who enter its habitat, causing them to lose their way. Additionally, the flickering spore it releases can cause drowsiness. It takes advantage of sleeping prey from sucking their energy through the tips of its arms. It can also transmit energy to whomever it likes, be it human, Pokemon, or vegetation, through the same method. And what do we have? We have an entire city entirely surrounded by these bioluminescent mushrooms and their previous form. The implications of this is the fact that it could be that the entire city is lost and that people are only getting to it because the forest wants people to be there. Alternatively, I guess, you know, it could be one of the best defenses of a city. After all, you can't attack anything that you can't find. And then, despite my love for the Appletun and Dreepy line, both of them being honestly really kind Pokemon. Appletun, sure, it sprays like a more acidic, sticky nectar to drive off Pokemon such as Lechonk, anything that's going to try and eat it a little bit. And then Dreepy Lime, they're just really not studied all that well because they like to stay stealth and stay to themselves. It's just not worth it, because then we look at the largest threat being the Gigantamax Pokemon. Gigantamax Machamp has punches that are as strong as Bomb Blast. G-Max Caporaja can level a mountain, and if it does do so in a single attack, it is multiple times stronger, literally thousands of times stronger than the meteor that jump-started the extinction of the dinosaurs. How do I know that? I did the math. If you haven't watched it, I have a video on who is the strongest Pokemon in lore. I did the math. And then there's just so many more G-Max Pokemon. It doesn't matter where you are in Galar. When a G-Max fight begins, you should be feeling the power of every single impact through the entirety of the region, no matter how far you are away from it. And when forces like that are being exerted, it is absolutely catastrophic because that energy has to go somewhere. The only reason people survive is because it's ultimately a cartoon, but if there is a shred of realism, then Galar is a terrible place to be in terms of Pokemon. If we choose to look at Chairman Rose and ignore Team Yell since they're Team Yell, Rose was desperate and was willing to hide the history of Galar to keep it in favor of royalty as he gets them on his side. He got way ahead of himself and decided, oh yes, allow me to jumpstart the darkest day once more. You know, a cataclysm that would blot out the sun, make Pokemon Gigantamax randomly throughout the region while we're at it, cause immense damage, and even cause agriculture to take a hit due to the lack of sunlight that it would cause. Great idea, Rose. Really using that thick skull of yours to come up with a great plan. Oh wait, you don't really come up with any good plans because your intelligence is actually Oleana, who looks up to Rose so much and was a massive nerd that is incredibly intelligent. She actually got praise from Rose because she had made a breakthrough in the Gigantamax and Dynamax phenomenons, very similarly to our professor of the region. But nobody would ever know that unless you watch the mini-series of Twilight Wings or look into a bunch of extra information within the game, because you see in the show, she transforms herself in order to be seen as beautiful, which is a shame. Maybe one day it'd be really fun to cover her and her girl boss team amongst other analyses of characters and their teams in Pokemon. Could just be a fun little thing to do. The only real saving grace of Galar is that the cities are actually phenomenal. Easy to access shops, lots of food to check out, and goods that are very easily accessible. Even the gym leaders tend to communicate, and some are even best friends. We see them take on proteges that would be trained to take over their gym leader positions, and when the darkest day returns, we see everyone working together to protect the people. We even get to see Champion Leon take the stage as he was already on top of it all, trying to stop it before it all truly began. I have to give major props to the Galar League for this, but unfortunately I see far too many risks from just the Pokemon themselves. I'm sure the Gmax events are a lot rarer, and there's gonna be some level of technology in place to keep people alive, but once again, if there isn't, there is far too much of a hazard, too many uncertainties, and as such, Galar, probably shocking to nobody, gets to be placed at the bottom at 10. The ancient past of Hisui. Nearly every single Pokemon here is a Pokemon that we have seen before, with the exception of a couple of our Hisuian variants. The lucky part about the variants is that they're usually tied in to be the noble Pokemon, one of Arceus' chosen favorites, or incredibly rare. I mean, the biggest threat of them, I would say, is probably the Hisuian Zoroark, which will stop at nothing to absolutely obliterate you because it has an incredible grudge on humanity for having pushed it and its families out into the cold, where they then died and were reborn as revenants. That is not exaggeration, that is pretty much exactly how the lore goes. Although, there is always the chance that if you do gain their trust and their love, you are deeply protected and deeply loved by them. Just don't betray them. No, the real threats here are just simply going to be your alpha Pokemon. They're far more aggressive, stronger, larger than your average Pokemon, to the point where even Pokemon like Rapidash are way more aggressive, whereas they usually aren't. Their power is multiplied, and they will prove to you who the alpha really is. Hisui's climate contains many elements from its modern day, but also contains many differences from what one would otherwise expect. The Pokemon are not the only thing that is harsh, but as is the region's climate. Each sub-region has its own subclimate, with Hisui's going through its own seasonal changes. These changes are usually accompanied by the forces of nature. Like Sinnoh, the region is colder in temperature, taking place farther north than other locations, allowing for people to dress more appropriately in bundled clothing. In Pokemon Legends Arceus, the weather typically changes all on its own and random intervals. Each sub-region has its own subclimate, with the Obsidian Fieldlands and Coronet Highlands having mostly clear skies, the Crimson Mirelands typically being more moist and damp, the Cobalt Coastlands often has rain showers, and the Alabaster Icelands is known to have strong winds and snow. These weather conditions are not exclusive to the individual locations aside from the snow, but are more common amongst them. In Daybreak, a short game patch story in Legends Arceus, 4 of the 5 subregions will have harsh rainstorms that causes massive mass outbreaks to occur. In the Alabaster Icelands, where rain doesn't occur, strong snowstorms are present instead. Hisui is unique among other locations in that it is known to carry space-time distortions when a space-time rift occurs over the head of Mount Coronet. These disturbances can appear throughout the entire region and brings Pokemon, items, and even people from alternate timelines or realities. Space-time distortions, along with the space-time rift, can create abnormal lightning and other weather conditions to occur. Looking at the leaders of Hisui, such as the Survey Corps, we find a group of people that are close-knit and work really well together, even defying orders for our own safety when we are wrongly accused of, just jump-starting the end of the world, just girl things. The downside, though, is when people from the Diamond and Pearl clan have to be put into their get-along shirts, just that way we can move forward with our story and figure out what is even going on in these lands. The real villain behind it all, being one of the more entertaining twists of all time, gonna give you a second if you somehow don't know, is Volo, ancestor of Cynthia, sporting her team, her ambitions to research the myths of the lands, and even her song. And I remember that I already knew the twist before I had played, and that he would reveal himself, and how he had been working closely with Giratina to take revenge on Arceus for banishing Giratina to the Distortion world. That, with the right trainer, Giratina truly could surpass Arceus, and all they needed to do was fully harness the power while Dialga and Palkia lost their collective minds, causing space-time distortions, whatever. The greatest appeal and the greatest drawback of Hisui is in fact where it is placed in time. We have less conveniences, but there are plenty of people working together within small communities in order to provide goods and services that are very easy to reach. Pokemon are not trusted yet, causing a great deal of anxiety to the general public as we work alongside the Survey Corps and Laventon himself to change that negative stigma, from giving people Geodudes to help them pickle their goods to investigating myths and rumors. We bring people and Pokemon together throughout the game, and I expect that's something that we're going to be doing a lot of in Legends ZA as well. I used to work out in the field, collecting data, swimming through streams, collecting water to bring back for the lab testing, and so much more, and I loved getting soaked, getting dirty. It did not matter. I know part of me would absolutely love living in the times of Hisui, but only for doing the work, not for being there every second of my life. So unfortunately, that means that Hisui would be placed incredibly low on my list, but not at the bottom. Despite my fears and dangers, we're gonna bump down one of our other regions and put it at an 8. Our final region before the new games come out and we get to adventure through Lumio City, the first city where humans and Pokemon are being tested for their possibility to live together in peace. But for now, we have Paldea. And oh boy, do I have a weakness for Paldea because of my Hispanic blood, I'm not gonna lie to you. Starting with geography. South Province, located in the southern region of Paldea, is the hometown of the player and their rival, 3 other settlements, and Paldea's largest city. The city is surrounded by a large river basin that splits into 3 smaller rivers that head out to Paldea's seas. The region is mostly grassy, with several small ponds and beaches, as well as a cave. To the southwest is an agricultural zone with a large olive orchard and an elevated area accessible via a large cavern, containing the top of a large waterfall and a leaning watchtower that stands in a pond. To the southeast is an area with a rocky terrain, a small region covered in wetlands, and a hidden beach. The southern sea is mostly empty aside from a sandbar and a couple tiny islets. Located in the eastern region of Paldea are 2 towns and a major city known for its striking skyline. The region contains several small rivers and a few ponds and beaches, and is divided between a grassy plains, a rocky mining zone, and a small forest. The eastern sea is mostly empty aside from a sandbar and 2 small islands. Located in the western region of Paldea is a city, a town, and a port. The region is mostly hilly and contains a few small rivers as well as a couple ponds and beaches. In the center of the region is a large desert located just south of a cavernous, overhanging rock formation supported by massive natural pillars. The western sea contains a few areas with large outcrops and protrusions as well as smaller rocky islets. And finally, located in the northern region of Paldea is a single town located on a snowy mountain. The mountain is the tallest in the Paldea region and features a hand-shaped cliff. South of the mountain is a route connecting the east to the west that cuts through caves in the mountain range. To the west is a large lake known for its massive waterfalls and a sparsely wooded nature trail. To the east is a rugged region containing a bamboo grove, some notable waterfalls, and several ponds, including a large pond marked by 3 watchtowers. The northern sea is known for its rock pillars in the northwest. It also contains some sandbars and rocky islets in the north and northeast. Regarding our quote-unquote evil team, Team Star, they're just another Team Skull in the end. Sure, they could serve as somewhat of a threat still, but they're more of an organized high school gang at best, with some incredibly talented individuals that once again just need the right hand and guidance to actually pay attention to them and their problems, considering what happened to them in the past, to cultivate those talents into fully fleshed skills of their own. Even if we move on to who would be the real threat of our game, I'm going to give you a second before I say it, our professors, It's fairly isolated in terms of what happens, and really only revolves around the idea of Paradox Pokemon becoming a massive threat if they are released en masse into the world, basically becoming invasive species that would destroy the entire ecosystem. So, not a massive threat if it's handled properly, especially compared to our other regions. That means we only have one thing to be concerned about, and that would be the Pokemon throughout the region. We do see Pokemon from other regions, of course, so I won't go over them as threats, since many of them are more isolated and keep to themselves. You might get ganged up on by a bunch of Flamigo. Knacklestack might try to hit you with pounds of salt in order to dry you out and turn you into human jerky, because yes, that's how they hunt. The scariest Pokemon might actually be Brambleghast. It is afraid of water, though an entire outbreak of them could bury an entire city. And if we look at where they spawn, one place being the desert right by Cascarafa, we can see that the city is surrounded by water. It's almost as if we only know the fact that they can bury an entire city is because it's happened in the past. And it might have happened to old Cascarafa, in which case they are making sure it never happens again. Espathra can be territorial, but so can so many other Pokemon be. Gimmighoul might steal your soul and force you to steal other coins for it as you gather them for it. It's because you decided to steal from it. And then Veluza is a self-destructive terror fish of the deep that will literally fillet itself, ripping off its own skin just to make sure it can swim faster and hit you harder because you decided to enter its waters. Now, when I look at a lot of these Pokemon and how Paldea is, they're fairly easy to avoid even if you're constantly out in the wild. This isn't something that we can say for all of our regions. The gym leaders here are a little bit separated, but they are visited by our champion Gita, who will check in on everyone and everything fairly often. When important matters come to head, the leaders also band together to answer these problems. And to be fair, there really weren't any real problems until we decided to enter the Great Crater of Paldea, and once we discovered those issues, we resolved them before exiting them again. The whole region just kind of felt good. There were no real massive threats. It was just a collection of rather nice stories, one of them being one of my favorite Pokemon stories of all time, being Arven, his Mastiff, and his life overall. I honestly think the characters are great, the story is fantastic, the music is fun, a lot of the Pokemon are really, really fun. Tinkaton is absolutely one of my top favorites. It's just, I don't know, it's a really great region, just held back by lag and I mean some visual stuff. It happens, it sucks, it shouldn't happen, but it did. But I still love the game. Now, when I think of Paldea, I think of all the food. Not just the picnics, but also all the food stands and the food shops, the little item shops in every city, alongside the special item stores that you can find. Seeing all of that food that you can purchase, I loved it. It hit me in my Hispanic heart and made me fall in love over and over and over again. The people you meet, and even how fun all the little mini trials are before you fight the gym leaders, were also reminding me of Alola, and that's another just, oh, that's a compliment. It all feels like they were trying to truly nurture trainers to see all the different potential routes available for them, so that way they could truly find their own treasure. Before I forget though, I will say it is really scary knowing that Koraidon, not the one that we have at the beginning of the game, but the other Koraidon is actually confirmed to have a kill. It has a confirmed kill, and that's insane to me. We have a lot of Pokemon that are like, oh, it might hurt you, oh, it might steal your soul. No, it killed, and that's insane to me. The same thing goes for Miraidon, not just Koraidon. Even if we consider Kitakami and the Blueberry Academy, everything is just an isolated event, and not in a bad way. All of the problems that happen in the game feel far more personal than, oh no, the world is gonna end. Oh, we gotta immediately tighten the strings. The tension is up, and we gotta save the world. No, sure, these problems could have caused a lot of problems and eventually led to worlds not ending, but worldwide problems. But they just weren't, and it was unlikely. And there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah, sure, things could have gotten a lot worse, but they didn't, and it's more likely that they won't in this region. Honestly, the greatest threat of all might be the Ruined Quartet. Those four, Ogerpon, Petrons, and maybe even Kubfu, might all come from the same lands, and I'm just getting this really big itch in my brain that's telling me I need to make a video to talk about what the next region might be and how it involves all of them. I know I've thrown a lot of video ideas out there in this video, but it's just what happened, so, you know, tell me what you like. Anywho, I digress though. Since this whole thing has, in the end, been my own personal preference, supported by what I deem to be influential towards whether or not I live in any region, I'm bumping everything down, moving it around a little bit after some extra careful consideration, and my list as to what regions are the best to live in. From worst to best, number 10, Galar. Number 9, Kalos. Hisui, Unova, 6 for Kanto, 5 for Hoenn, 4 for Johto, 3 Sinnoh, 2 Alola, and number 1 for Paldea. Tell me what region you would like to live in. Tell me all about it in the comments below. Give plenty of reasoning if you'd like. I usually read all the comments even if I don't respond to them all, and I would love to see your reasoning as to where you would like to live. You can import Pokemon, who cares? Become a good trainer, become a good professional, whatever you do, and like trade Pokemon. Try to get those Pokemon from other regions if your favorite Pokemon's in another region. I want to know a region you would live in and why, based on the region itself and everything else that I've said. Again, just remember, you're still human. You don't have plot armor as a main character, so do your best out there. And if you did enjoy this, thank you for watching. Please make sure you subscribe, share this with other people, even become a member for as little as $3 a month. It does a lot to help my small channel with the fluctuating ad revenue that does come on through. And all of these people who you see on screen have either been gifted memberships or are members themselves, and I thank all of you for your support. If you're looking for another video to go watch my ecology series if you haven't yet. If you liked this, then go watch. I have videos that detail route per route the ecology of an entire region and what Pokemon scientifically, while also staying true to the lore, might actually eat each other. Quagsire eats snakes. Think about it that way. Shrews and so on and so forth. But with that, I digress. And as always, thank you so much for watching. Don't do anything I want to do. Don't do anything I want to do. Please be nice to each other. I love you, and I'll see you next time. Bye!